So this is Michael Servetus on the pulmonary circulation of the blood. It is not said that the soul primarily exists in the heart's walls or in the very body of the brain or liver, but as God himself teaches in Genesis 9, Leviticus 17, and Deuteronomy 12, in the blood. Hold on, give me a second here. Okay, so this is Michael Servetus. He was the martyr. He was a martyr. They burned him at the stake. John Calvin pushed for his execution. He prosecuted. He authored the prosecution. So John Calvinist, a famous Protestant Reformationist, had put this guy to death because they disagreed on baptism and Trinity and other tiny nuances when it comes to how to worship Jesus Christ. He was a devout Christian, loved Jesus, thought of Jesus as a God. And actually he was very much Jesus-like. He confronted the religious authorities. The religious authorities didn't like it, and they ultimately crucified him. The vital spirit has its origin in the heart's left ventricle, with the lungs particularly assisting in the generation of it. It is a thin spirit which has worked with the force of heat of bright red color and of such fiery power as if it were a bright vapor rising from pure blood and holding within itself the substance of water, air, and fire. It is generated as a result of a mixing process that has occurred in the lungs of inhaled air with worked fine blood, which the heart's right ventricle communicates to the left. Moreover, this communication does not take place through the middle of the heart's wall, as is commonly held. Rather, by a great mechanism, fine blood is kept in motion from the right ventricle of the heart via a long passage through the lungs. It is readied by the lungs and made red, and it flows from an arterial vein, pulmonary artery, into a venous artery, pulmonary vein. Next, it is mixed with the inhaled air, and by the act of exhalation is freed from waste. Finally, the entire mixture, a material suitable to become a vital spirit, is drawn hither into the left ventricle of the heart during the diastole. This construction of the human being is a most amazing thing. Blood, breath, and the soul. The whole of this is like the material of the soul itself. Aside from this entire mixture, there are still two other things in the soul: that living element which is created by the act of breathing or produced in its own matter, and the spirit itself or divinity that is infused therein by the act of breathing. All of this forms one thing and one soul. Such is the entire nature of the soul, and the reason why the soul of all the flesh is in the blood, and why the soul itself is in the blood, as God says. For by God's breath the gust of the heavenly spirit, or the ideal spark, has been infused through the mouth and nostrils into the heart and brain of Adam himself and into that of his children. And it has been joined in essence to that spiritual bloody material within. It has been made soul within his innards. So why does this matter? Well, he's a scientific person. He's going to point out the pulmonary circulation of the blood. He's like the first one to do it before some other guy and after some other guy. So he's one of the first people to say, hey, the heart and the lungs work, in conjunction. And then you breathe in oxygen. Oxygen mixes with the heartbeat and the circulation. And it even says it turns the blood red, which I didn't know that. So when you inhale, you have all that oxygen goes into your bloodstream, and the heart works with the lungs, and that's a part of the circulation right there. That's pulmonary circulation, is the circulation of the lungs. And this has to do with his theology, right? When you look at science, when you look at, essentially how crazy, arteries and veins are just like little tiny tubes. Just little tiny tubes, not even, bigger. Copper pipe is pretty thin, but it's smaller than copper piping. And the fact that all those things work in conjunction with one another. The heart is beating, boop, 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 boop. It's sitting there pushing the blood all throughout the body. You breathe in that oxygen. The circulation distributes the oxygenated blood all throughout the entire body. There's varicose veins. That's because when the blood goes to the feet, usually it's in the calves, it doesn't pump back. And so in order to help with varicose veins, if you elevate your feet, that helps the blood pump back up to the heart. Because if you think about it, as a water pump, it's pumping outwards. Gravity helps it go downward, but for it to come back up, it's got to compete up against gravity. It's got to compete against gravity. And then it's also got that long distance. So it's got to pump, continuously all the way down, all the way back up. It's remarkable. And then he even connects it with the soul. He's saying this is where the point of life begins. This is how our life is maintained. So he was a super smart guy. Wrote all these treatises, wrote all these books, like 1,000 pages for that last book that he got in trouble for, or 800 pages. And all his writings are very thoughtful. They're very intelligent and thoughtful. When John Calvin had him killed, they had his book on his leg when they burned him. They tried to destroy every copy. There's only like 2 or 3 copies of one of his books that had survived. Thank goodness. Thank goodness it survived, because that would be a way to just delete a person from humanity. Reminds me of The Departed. I deleted you. You deleted me. He was an undercover officer for years, and he was able to infiltrate a mafia gang, and then some corrupt cop who was a part of that mafia had deleted that entire profile. I'll delete you. Oh my God. I'm a police officer. I went through the training. I've been living with all these psychos and enemies for a long time. So that's incredible. Marcus Servetus could have been deleted. And I guess I should just mention these other guys, because when it comes to martyrs, I mean, there's some other guys that had got the auto da fe. What is that? Giordano Bruno and Jan Hus, Joan of Arc, just off the top of my head. Because when you say the name of the dead to the earth, they are still alive. Marcus Servetus.